turn off the sound until this. I'll just wait.
We're live on YouTube at least.
Turn off the sound. There we go. That's taken care of. So welcome everybody to our bi-weekly, is that right? Our bi-weekly outreach meeting. We are in the midst of, for those watching at home, we are in the midst of, we recently changed our meeting schedule, which may be affecting a participation a little bit, but I also just think that a lot of people are overwhelmed right now with a lot of stuff. So, but we're going to go ahead and do our meeting as regular. So let's just jump in with the three of us and do our weekly introductions. Just ask people to identify who they are, where they're from, and just any tidbit they want to share about either what they're doing with Backdrop or life in general, I suppose. I am Tim Erickson. I'm coming to you from Deerwood, Minnesota, about 2 hours north of the Twin Cities, St. Paul and Minneapolis. And I will just share that I've been really overwhelmed with life and work lately. So Backdrop hasn't been getting a lot of attention. But we did have a nice meeting about CiviCRM stuff for Backdrop.org earlier this week, and maybe we can talk briefly about that later. Sarvashri, do you want to go next?
Okay, my name is Sarvashri, and I'm new to CMS development, really. Although I've done it for years, I'm not any good at it, and I don't know very much yet. I've just put up pages and blogs, that's it. But I'm learning more, and I'm working on a beginner's guide, I should say, extraordinary beginner's guide to Backdrop, ultimate beginner's guide, I might say, to try to get people up to speed so that they can use it if they're not already developers. A lot of the users on a Backdrop are former Drupal developers. They take to it right away, but we need people who have no skills to be able to use Backdrop. So I'm working on that ultimate guide. And I just posted 2 posts to our documentation meeting. One was on how to get great audio for tutorials, and the other one is on great lighting for tutorials. So people can see you and get to know you, and you look good. So those 2 things are worth looking at. Those aren't available to the public, I don't think, or are they?
Or if you posted them on GitHub, they are.
Okay. So somewhere we'll post how you can get to those, to look at those if you're interested in doing video tutorials for anything, but especially for Backdrop, because we want some great Backdrop tutorial videos. So, Greg.
Hi, my name is Greg. I'm usually in Australia, but for the past year, stuck in Greece. Yeah, we skipped or at least I didn't join the previous meeting, so I'm trying to catch up with things. Instead of, because of the time changes, the previous week's meetings were sort of like unefficient discussions. So I'm going to bring certain things up later in the agenda, but yeah, let's get this going.
Good. So I'm going to try a couple of things this week to sort of move us through and maybe be a little more action orientated this week. And one of the things that I started 2 weeks ago is experimenting a little bit with, so 2 things that we're going to try. Experimenting with using Miro a little bit more, which I'll show you in a second. I'll share my screen. But also we're going to try and use a portion of these meetings to get working on Backdrop Live every meeting, and we also have other topics every week. So I'd like to try and break the meeting into like 3 15-minute segments so that we know it won't be precise. We're not going to, stop exactly at 15 minutes. But the point is, so we know if we're falling behind and can try to move on and make sure we got time to at least address all the topics. And I think if there are some topics that are just too big to fit into this, then we need to talk about another meeting.
Yep.
So I'm going to start out with, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen briefly. And I know some people prefer that we not do that the whole meeting, so I'll just do it for a little bit. For this first section in particular, what I'd like to do, I've created this Miro board, which for me at least is helpful to sort of visualize some of the weekly ongoing stuff we have to do and hopefully move through it. And basically, to keep things going in our blog, I'd like to, keep this list full of ideas and also get some stuff scheduled and really try harder to meet, to get something out at least every week. I think that we can do that, especially maybe if we loosen our standards a little bit and just, write sort of short announcement blog posts that just let the community know what's going on. There's a lot of things that do happen in Backdrop that really don't get out to the public very well. For example, this time switch that we did this time switch and we never really did a blog post until today. And we made this decision like 3 weeks ago. So last week was the first official week and a lot of people still hadn't heard about that. The other thing is I, for one, do a lot of tweeting, and I would love to actually use a little bit of time in this meeting to just sort of brainstorm and keep a list of ideas here that we can refer to when tweeting. Also, the virtual user group. I think if we make a point to try and have at least 2 virtual user groups scheduled, I think with what we're learning with Backdrop Live, we can have really productive sessions that aren't heavily scheduled and prepared. So I think there's no reason we can't, like every 2 weeks, just have a topical discussion, have somebody prepared to lead it, and somebody prepared to host it. 2 weeks ago, Sarvashri specifically said he'd like to see a virtual user group on creating custom views. So anyways, I'd like to just, for this segment of this meeting, fill in some of these things. And it occurred to me, if we could come up with at least one more, so we're a little bit limited in participants today, but I'd love to come up with another virtual user group. I think for this upcoming one, creating custom views, this is a topic that a lot of us could kind of wing, without a lot of preparation. And I'm willing to host or I could do that presentation, but I'd also really like to open it up to have somebody else sort of lead that. My view for that would be that it could start with just somebody walking through the views interface and explaining it to a beginner would be a way to handle that, and then to just sort of open it up to discussion and questions and have people share interesting things they've done with views or bring their own questions. So if anybody is willing to facilitate that or to be the presenter, let me know. Can we come up with at least one more topic like that we could get on the schedule and recruit a volunteer for?
One thing that we were looking at doing is copying the Drupal 7 user guide video so that we didn't have to repeat quite so much or figure it out from scratch. We could just copy what they've done. Also, Olaf had a nice presentation on the web for creating a website.
So what we're looking for right here, Sarvashri, are specific ideas that we can do in a virtual user group. So this would be a live discussion that we could have, and we need a topic idea. The thing that you really liked that Olaf did was about layouts, wasn't it? Or was it more than that?
Yeah, it was basically creating a front page, all the things that I mentioned before, creating a front page, creating a blog, creating a data set and putting that data set up using views. The things that we would need to do to create the Drupal lookalike, each one of those things could be one of these discussion groups, just taking it step by step.
Sure. So one way to think about this is we could sort of walk through, this would be a way of generating some video content with that kind of an outline, Sarvashri, but I want to be clear that the idea for the virtual user groups is that they're interactive and so inherently less prepared. They're not going to be like a professional tutorial video, but they might be better than nothing. So we could take a lot of those topics like layouts, creating custom views, and make them into user groups.
Yeah, you start out like everything that you do when you're writing, you start it with a scratch pad, and this is like a scratch pad. You get a group of people together, you talk about stuff, you figure out what you want to cover, and it's all sort of chaotic, but everybody's introducing their ideas. Then you go back and look at that and you structure it and create the tutorials from that.
Okay. Sure. So these virtual use, some of these at least could be sort of dry runs or like note taking for that. Let's I'm going to take as an idea the blog post that Olaf did and see if we can't turn that into a user group meeting, and then that blog post could serve as background materials, and then we could basically have a discussion, kind of walk through some of what was covered there and give people a chance to ask questions.
Yeah,
Yeah, but what we have to do is see if Olaf is willing. I mean, we don't need Olaf to do this, but I think it would be great if we could get him.
Yep.
So I'm going to put this down as a tentative idea for the second one, and we don't have to plan out any further. If anybody has another specific idea for now, I'm going to look at the blog post and see. I think it was primarily about using layouts, but it might have been a little bit more generic than that. And either way,
it was in two parts.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
By the way, Dan and Phil have joined the group. I don't know if
they have. Okay.
Hello.
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 Right.
Hi, Jen.
So we're just trying to brainstorm. We're going to spend about another 5 minutes and then move on to some other topics. Just virtual user group ideas. I think we've got 2 ideas out there. The other thing are blog posts, articles, or Twitter posts. Things. These could also go into a dashboard notifications. Is there anything going on right now that we should be talking about? And I can start this out with a few things I listed. We've come up with some possible virtual user groups. So these are things we want to talk about. We are coming up on the code freeze, sort of reminding people via social media by coming up. Well, it's 2 weeks away, right? Anybody correct me? May 15th is the next release. So
Yeah. So
May
around
1st.
May 1st, there's going to be a code freeze. I'm going to check the dates. So May 1st is actually a Saturday. So we may decide to give us that weekend and do the content freeze on the 3rd, which is a Monday, as we usually do, or maybe we'll do the content freeze on Friday. I don't know.
Okay.
But it will be around May 1st. Yeah.
So, yep. Okay. So that's a topic. The
Sorry, and
Go
we
ahead.
should. It's not a code freeze. It's a feature freeze.
yes, that's a good point. Well, yeah. It occurred to me, there was some talk on Twitter yesterday about Drupal talking about the project browser. I think Luke posted something in Zulip about this.
Yeah, I actually watched the Dries Nord, and I actually made a comment on the Slack channel at the company that I work for, saying that this was a Dries Nord that I enjoyed, which hasn't happened for many years now, and it was less upsetting. And they're actually there actually there was a section about the forgotten user or site builder, which was exciting. And my hope is that they're probably going to start doing, at least they acknowledge that they overcomplicated things for certain people. So my hope is that they're going to start doing things.
Okay.
But that was a prelude to the project browser. So yeah, there were other things that they were planning. But yeah, I enjoyed that one.
Nice. Well, it just occurred to me that like now might be a good time for us to remind people about the project browser in Backdrop
Yeah.
in our social media channel, where we're, you know, one of the a legitimate thing to do is just to go back and remind people from time to time on Twitter about
Yeah.
things.
Dries at some point showed a screenshot of 4 project browsers by 4 competitors, and I said, "Oh, Backdrop should be there as well."
Sure. That would be nice, wouldn't it?
What is this project browser thing?
Oh yeah, so it basically in Drupal as it is now in Drupal 7 and 8 and 9, if you want to install additional modules that are not included with core, you have to go to drupal.org. First of all, if you're a new user, as Dries presented it, it's like first you have to figure out what modules are and how they add functionality to Drupal, and then once you understand what modules are, you need to know where to look for them, find them, download them, put them on your server, then install them. So this is a process that is tedious, but I'm taking it that team you're gonna fire Anista so that we can show it live. So good. So a project browser is something that we've been enjoying for many years now, and it's something that WordPress also has, and I think that's where we borrowed the idea from. So we still have the traditional way to allow people to install modules the way that they used to with Drupal by manually downloading and exporting the code, or pasting a URL to a zip file from the user interface. But we also have a visual project selector, downloader, and installer, which is what Tim is going to show you.
Yeah, I
Yes,
use
yeah.
both of them, and the thing in Backdrop is much better.
Yeah, you can't do this in Drupal. You can't just browse through all of the available contrib modules and install them right through the.
And it's messy to install them in Drupal too.
Yep.
Here you can just click on them and install, add them to the installation queue, and there you go. It's right there. It's
Anyway,
wonderful.
are there any other things like that that would be good social media things to remind people about or to talk about?
Can't think of anything right now, but maybe the rest of the people in the call can chime in.
Okay. Well, what else is going on? When we have, well, these things overlap a bit. We also have some blog post ideas. Any of these blog posts could turn into tweets, of course, but once we get them done. And so, oops, we got the PMC update twice. Some of the topics we have in mind, we just need somebody to write. Why did I do that? Is a PMC update. We had a meeting earlier this week about Civi CRM, and we'd like, it's soon, I think we might be at a stage where somebody could post an update about sort of what that project is doing and what our plans are. An update on our code of conduct discussions. Sarvashri, if you wanted to do like in fact, I would encourage you to do a blog post that talks about what your goals are for videos and what you're looking for people to do. And that might be a way to find some people, other people who are interested.
Just an idea, because it was also mentioned in the DrupalCon, it's focused on contribution a lot. And I would like 2 subjects. I don't know where they fit, whether they fit in the tweeting or blogging or doing a user group about it, but easy entry to start contributing in any way, be it code, be it documentation, and then also mentioning certain things that a few members of the community expressed that we should sort of like develop a mentality and an environment where we don't even unknowingly sort of like imply that contribution is required or expected from people, so that we don't put that burden. So I don't know where that would fit, but yeah, we could have a discussion about how to contribute and things like that, and making it easier for people that want to contribute actually.
Well, sure. I mean, the thing that you said that was specific to me was sort of talking about expectations. That seems like a really specific topic. In terms of contributing in general, there's so much that we could do that what I'd be looking for is more specific ideas.
Which could fit in a user group. That's what I was getting at.
Yeah, it could. I'm going to say one quick thing about that, and then maybe we should move on to another topic, which is that I like that idea on the one hand, but what concerns me is the comment that Rob Feature made a few weeks ago about all of our channels being focused on getting people to contribute and not just users. And I feel like it might be that the virtual user group is a place where
Fair enough.
where we focus on just using Backdrop and not turn it into, that doesn't mean we don't talk about contribution. Obviously it's going to come up and it can be a part of the discussion, but maybe we keep the user group focused on how do you use Backdrop. That's just a thought. But
Yeah.
I don't know.
Have we
That's not to say we would never do contribution there.
Yeah, of course. Have we done anything on multilingual? I think
We actually did just recently. That was like one of our last 2 or 3 topics.
Cool.
So you can check the video on that. It was a kind of a loose discussion about it. Matthias helped talk about showed a site that he was working on.
The other thing is that I've started experimenting with a lot of vanilla D7 to Backdrop upgrades, and I'm trying to improve certain things and fix certain things in the process. So I don't know some discussions might come out of it.
Okay, great. I'm going to stop sharing and I think move on to what we talked about, Jen and Phil, before you got here, was sort of dividing the meeting into 3 agendas, the 3 parts, about 15 minutes each, the intro part that we just did, and now spend about 15 minutes talking about Backdrop Live, just getting that discussion going, and then leaving 15 minutes to talk about whatever else. So the next Backdrop Live is scheduled for July, shortly after the 4th, like the 10th or something. It has been suggested that we try to use at least some time in these meetings to get that process going earlier. We've already waited a while. We're it's April 15th, so it's May, well, we're 3 months out. So we still have quite a bit of time. But I thought what might be a useful outcome for the meeting today would be identify what are the first things that need to happen. Where should we be starting?
I have a few questions.
Yep.
So I know questions, observations as well. So we've tried to ease things by creating a dedicated events website and a GitHub repository where we can discuss things. And I guess now we have templates for sort of like recreating these recurring events. Are there any tasks that we sort of like, I'm sure there are a lot, but I mean, major tasks that we need to do with regards to sort of like, preparing something that can be reused, which can be paired with the recent sort of like CVCRM thing and, reaching out to people that are going to join.
So you're talking specifically about Backdrop Live?
Yes. So how to use, for example, CVCRM so that we can gather information about people that have already attended or people that express interest, and then, communicating things to them. But also the various tools that we've already built, and, we've identified tasks that need to happen each time. Maybe sort of like deciding early who has time for what and things like that.
Yeah. So if I hear what you're saying, Gregory, I think what you're suggesting is that now might be a good time to think about a repeatable process for each event, as opposed to just focusing on the next one. And that makes sense to me. Yep.
And what helps us, for example, with releases, when we do releases, we have a release template, which we reuse. And actually each task on the template has candidate people that it can be assigned to. It doesn't mean that it's going to be assigned to that person, but it's sort of like that person has offered to do that, is knowledgeable enough to do that specific task. And usually we assign it. If they can't do it, they can remove themselves, of course. But I was proposing to sort of like break down the tasks that we do repetitively, identify which people usually volunteer or know how to do them, and then preparing and by asking these people, are you going to be able to do it in the next one?
Sure. So I'm not sure that wouldn't be a good use of our time right now, would be to sort of break down the big tasks. While doing that, identify which ones are most important, and also start trying to assign names, but doing it in a way that is reproducible. Like you said, it's kind of a template. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I understand that this cannot be done in one go. Like this feels like a documentation sort of like thing that will improve, will be a live thing, ongoing thing that will be improving as we go. It's time that we do things and learn from that. But it would be great to sort of like documenting things as we do and keeping record actually of who does what and what needs to be done.
Is there software to help this? Like I use outline processors a lot. So I have a sequence beginning to end, and there are headings and subheadings within that sequence. Outlines are great for any kind of organization. Is that something that is part of Git or?
Yeah, so summaries at the top of issues, like in any comment that you add, you can add a dash space brackety thing and it converts that into a checkbox. So you can put a series of such things and you can have multiple checkboxes of tasks that need to be done. And then when they're done, you tick them off. And this is what we actually use for our releases. So I was thinking that maybe we can produce such a thing. It could be rough, like only whatever comes to mind now. Rough things like change the update the events site to mention the next date of the live, archive the previous one, and maybe links to any recordings or things. So repetitive things that need to happen.
Yes, just a task list is what it is. In an outline processor, you can drag and move things up and down easily.
Okay, I'm not sure how this discussion is relevant to what we want to do right now. I mean, go ahead.
You're trying to make a list of.
Yeah, we've got 10 minutes to work on this right now. So I'd like to jump in and go ahead and talk about what these tasks are and just lay them out, or create a list.
Okay.
We can work that into more of an outline later if that's helpful.
Yep, sure.
So I think there's tasks, and it occurred to me like one of the things I think would be really helpful is to have a coordinator and I've mentioned this before, in Europe and or Australia, sort of to coordinate the different time zones and to be responsible for that. And I think at this stage, that's less of a task and more of a role. Yeah. So I'm going to create tasks and roles that we need to think about. And I'm going to just call this geographic coordinators.
Yep.
What other either tasks or roles?
So yeah, is the event? Sorry, my computer is always getting really slow when Zoom is on. So have we updated the events site to mention the next date, even if it's tentative?
There is. It's on the list of events as a tentative date, but that's as far as we've gotten. If you go to the website and you go to events, you'll see tentative date for the next Backdrop Live. Getting the registration form set up, coordinating with SFO, Software Freedom Conservancy, or SFC. Jen, is there anything happening that's moving us closer to understanding how to make sure that happens next time? No.
No, I poked them recently and haven't heard anything. I can do it again.
Yeah, there's some talk about just having a general meeting with them, isn't there? Just to sort of check in on overall how we should communicate with them.
Yeah.
So the thing that, going back to the topic that I mentioned before, so I'm visiting, unless I'm seeing some older version or something. So the main event site, events.backdropcms.org, still mentions March 12th and March 13th.
Yeah.
So this is what I was referring to.
Good point.
Archive that and say, this has happened. This is where you can find resources from that meeting. The next one is scheduled for them, tentatively, whatever. So This is what I was referring to when I was saying update the events site.
Yes, that has not happened.
Okay, so add it to the list, please. That's what I was getting at.
Yep, I just did. I'm
Okay,
working on
thank
I'm editing the agenda and I just added that.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Uh,
I also am working on an issue in the events queue where I'm documenting everything you guys are saying. And I'm
Oh, okay.
adding stuff to it.
Cool.
That's great. I'll quickly say this about Civi CRM because it's relevant here. It's been raised like how we could use Civi CRM to better manage events at the nextbackdrop.org. We had a meeting on Tuesday that was just this week, wasn't it? Yep. About using Civi CRM better as an organization in general. And I think what we decided in that meeting was that getting events going on Civi CRM may not be our first priority, but it is a long-term goal. There was some discussion about whether or not events should just be rolled into the main backdrop site or it should be kept as its own site. I think for now, we're going to keep it as its own site, but try to figure out ways to get the data into the main Civi CRM. We just want one instance of Civi CRM. So I don't think we should count on having being able to use Civi CRM for the next Backdrop Live, although it could happen. But in the meantime, I think we should just go ahead and get the current events website going for that. What are other things we could be working on? Well, any tasks that need to happen. It's like
schedule, which is basically like the sessions, like this. What you call it?
right.
Yeah, people suggesting sessions.
So usually with a camp, we have like an old school in-person camp. There was like a whole bunch of dates that were established ahead of time that was like, okay, well, we know that we're gonna open registration on X date, and then on Y date we're gonna open session submissions, and on Z date we're gonna select the sessions, and then on A date we're gonna shut everything down and lock it down when we're out of tickets or whatever it is. And we haven't done that yet for Backdrop Live. We've just been like, oh, Backdrop Live is soon, do all the things. I don't know that that's something is necessary for an online event, but I think it would really help in terms of publicity if we have those milestones just to motivate us to be like, oh, let's tell people about it again. Let's tell people about it again. And then more people might sign up ahead of time. So since we know the approximate dates of all these upcoming events, we might even be able to set up a pattern where we know for sure it's always a month backwards. And then we would have the dates for the rest of the year. We could set up the nodes on backdropcms.org. We could even use Scheduler to automatically publish them and have these things go out to the homepage on time. It's something we haven't thought about before, but now that you bring it up, Greg, I think it could be easy to do that using the system that we have in place now.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think so. And so I added a third category of sort of things to list right now, which tasks, roles, and sort of dates or deadlines. And by dates or deadlines, I'm not looking for the date, but more the what are the things that we should go on that schedule. For now, I see open registrations, open for sessions, announce the official date. I don't know what I mean. We'll come up. We can.
Yeah. So I think that Jen was mentioning announcing the dates where the registration is open, and announcing it ahead of time that registration is going to open. But I think that registration is allowed up to last minute, even, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, that doesn't apply much to us. But sessions also until last minute.
Well, yes. I mean, unless something changes, and that's the thing. Right now about scheduling when we open for sessions is that will depend on how we're accepting them, which is, we're starting to get into a pattern, but we're still, I think, working on the tools for how we want to do that in the future.
Yeah, I would actually be more specific. It's open for submission, proposal for sessions, or not for sessions exactly, because it's not the actual sessions.
Sure.
Yeah. And then on the roles, we also have the security sort of I don't know what you call it, the watch guard, whatever, for the main room, the person, what do we call them?
Yeah, like the
people
greater,
that volunteer, the people that volunteer to safeguard us from Zoom bombers.
Yep.
Greeter. Yeah. exactly.
I'm just going to call them greeters, but or we also had like a safety committee or something
Yes.
idea.
Yeah.
I'm going to put both of those.
What
I
else?
think, again, so that we can kind of, it would be very easy in any given meeting to just let Backdrop Live take over the entire meeting. So I'm trying to budget this out and just spend a little bit of time and then leave time for other discussion. So if we're going to try, this has got us going. And I think building out this agenda, putting names to this, I would like to figure out, I think for me, the most two important things for us to do quickly is one, figure out the whole registration problem with with SFC. And possibly even get them working, because they have to set up something for us to accept payments through their system, and they need enough notice. And so let's get out ahead of that this time and make that like one of the priorities. To me, the other priority is that we're getting a lot of feedback that people love this idea of an international schedule, but I just don't foresee it working well unless we have folks in Europe and that are designated as point people that can sort of be the contact for making sure we have volunteers, making sure that we're getting session submissions at those times. So I think what I'm looking for is somebody to volunteer to be that person.
Maybe until we sort of because it's my understanding that CV does that, it's soliciting help from people. Like it lets you allow, it lets people say that they are willing to help with certain tasks and which times of the year they're available. But now we can do it manually. We can actually solicit volunteers for live. So ask them if they will be available during those dates and what they're willing to help with.
Yeah, but what I'm looking for right now is more than just a volunteer on the day. I'm looking for somebody that's sort of willing to be the point person to represent Europe during this process, right? Because I think that's thinking about the issues. That's also encouraging people from I think one of the problems we get in is that we're not getting session ideas from Europe early, so we don't get anything on the schedule. So anybody who comes, it doesn't look like the time slots in Europe are going to be very active, so they don't sign up. And it's we need to get somebody thinking about that up front. We need to get ideas. So that's what I'm looking for. Individual volunteers to be, greeters from Europe, that we can deal with later. But I need that point person who's sort of going to be the contact.
How do we solicit? How do we announce that we're looking for such people?
Okay, well, I think I just did.
Sorry?
I think I just did. But
okay.
I get your point. I think normally the way we would do this is just in this meeting or in Slack or in
exactly
Zulip.
In Zulip, yeah.
We could tweet. That could be a good tweet. I'm going to put it on the tweet on my tweet schedule for something to remember. Okay. Well, I want to leave some time for other topics. I feel like we've got to start here. People can add to this this list of tasks, and I think certainly Jen or I could probably either of us dump a bunch of ideas in here just off of our head later.
Where's that going to be?
So it's in the agenda for this week, but I think Jen has also made a ticket where in which repo?
Events.
So you can combine the two documents, and where do those go? Where do people go to add?
Yeah, the one Jen's creating, I think, would be the official one because that's in GitHub, and that's where we would want people to go and edit it and add ideas.
And I think we could also, so my issues title is create a GitHub issue template. So we can continue to modify that as needed. And then every time we have an event, we'll just create a new one from the template.
Right.
Yeah, let's do the same thing that we do basically for releases.
But for releases, I don't think we actually have a template in the queue because we don't want it to bother everybody else who's creating issues. It's only it's in our GitHub repository as a flat file. But I think in this case, it might be useful to have it in the public queue because my vision long-term is this event site can be used by anyone in any location to host any backdrop event. And so having something for them that would be like, this is what you should do to make your event, could be really helpful. So I don't know, maybe thinking too long-term, but.
Well,
No,
yeah,
and
doesn't hurt.
how the templates evolved with the releases is like on the current release we said, oh, we need a task for this, and then we would update so we can do the same thing. It's worked for us. So yeah.
Well, just to reiterate that getting that registration stuff going with SFC and getting our geographic coordinators, maybe a way to phrase that would be identifying a group of people that included geographic coordinators. So having sort of a steering committee for this event would be good. That some specific names as opposed to whoever shows up in any given week. So let's think about that for the next meeting. And then I'm going to suggest we move on.
Yep.
And we talk about, so move on to the other portions of our topic.
And Phil is raising
Greg,
his hand.
Oh.
And it's actually,
Sure.
Yeah, I've added
ready
that point for Phil, so let him just do the talking. Yeah.
I'm going to just ask him for a couple of seconds. The two things that we've identified so far are this community talk. Actually, I don't know if Sarvashri has anything new, but we've been talking a lot about video tutorials. And if we have time for that, we can, but I'd like to start with Phil's issue and or this, the community talk one, which may be the same. Go ahead, Phil.
Yeah, community talk. I'm assuming it's the same thing, basically. Formal location for community discussion. Is that kind of what you're thinking, Tim?
Yep.
Okay. So Greg and I, we kind of talked last week. I mean, for anybody, I guess, that's watching or listening on the back end, there's kind of two schools of thought as far as where this should be housed. I think what we'll probably go ahead and do for a short-term solution is put it in the GitHub in the backdrop-ops organization and just create a single repository to house this discussion. Right now, all of this discussion is sitting in backdropcms.org repository, which really just needs to be relegated for tasks and changes that need to be made to the backdropcms.org website. So we need to pull all that discussion out of that repo and put it into its own repo so that, anything that is about the organization, about Backdrop, it has nothing to do with code. It has to do with moving things forward. We need kind of a formal place, and that's what this overall discussion is about. So I think really what we need to probably go ahead and do, set up that single repository. Need to decide on a name. There's a couple floating out there. I'll get to that in a minute. But go ahead and just create a place that general discussion can take place. Long term, if it's decided that we need to break that out into another place, for example, into forums on the Backdrop website or into a different GitHub organization, just kind of depending on the scale of that thing and logistics, we can kind of discuss moving things around or reorganizing where that discussion takes place at a later time. So the immediate issue is get it off of that backdropcms.org repo and into its own repo, and that really needs to take precedence. So as far as names go for that repo, backdrop-community has been one thought. Me personally, I like the idea of doing a backdrop-talk and kind of doing a branding around Backdrop Talk, meaning anytime you see anything from that kind of a brand standpoint of Backdrop Talk, get it to a point where people understand, hey, this is discussion about the community. This is discussion about moving things forward and ideas about how we can grow as a community as opposed to, code related talk. So thoughts on names, thoughts on the overall discussion?
what can you define exactly what stuff is moving from the main queue into this queue? Is it everything that doesn't have to do with the website, or is it just a subset of items?
I think Greg's probably going to be the better person to bring this up, but for example, I've created an issue in the backdropcms.org issue queue number, I think it's number 778, specifically revolving around this discussion. And it's kind of like, that has nothing to do with the website.
Sure. Let me just say that what I think the current status is, and then we can talk about how we're changing it. Because for me right now, backdropcms.org is for everything that doesn't fit somewhere else, right? Is that anything else goes there. So what I think this proposal is that now backdropcms.org queue is just for backdropcms.org for content and changes. And everything else would go to the new repo.
Right.
That's my
Not
understanding.
not necessarily everything else, but things like, for example, funding or monetizing, as it was called. This has nothing to do, or there might be subtasks that will need to sort of like be communicated or advertised or whatever you want to call it on the main site, but it has nothing to do with the website itself. So we need this is a community discussion. So basically things like that, matters like that. And one crucial thing that should be discussed as well, it's not whether it's going to be a GitHub repo or a forum. It could be actually both, because what we discussed with Phil is the end result will be a policy and a document, or multiple policies and documents, and that needs GitHub repo. So we'll have the repo. But for discussions, maybe GitHub is not the perfect tool. So maybe we need also a matching category on our forum where people that don't have GitHub accounts can just jump in and discuss. And then maybe if there's enough people chiming in on a certain subject and there's a sort of like general consensus formulated that this needs to be taken into GitHub, and then form a document, that's the process.
Yeah. So I was asking primarily for figuring out what to name things. And there are a lot of issues in the backdrop queue that are related to like publicity tasks and stuff that you're exactly right, need a to-do list somewhere, which doesn't necessarily fit in the forum, but we didn't have anywhere else to put it. But those kind of things I don't think I would look in a repository called Talk for, just because Talk definitely sounds like a forum. Like it sounds like a place where you go to discuss things and not a place to find to-do items. So I like, Phil, your idea about branding it that way and having something that could have that terminology consistent between the forum and the repository, I think is good. I'm just not sure that's the right name, just because I want people who are looking for those things to be able to find them. Now, that said, I don't know that you would be able to find it in Backdrop Community either, but at least that seems like a place where people would poke around, like if they didn't know what that was, where with Talk, you might just immediately dismiss it as being like, oh, like maybe that's a chat platform or something. I'm not even going to look at that. So yeah, that's my only thought. I also don't have strong feelings. If everyone likes Talk, I'm fine with Talk.
Yeah, I kind of like the word Talk, like Phil said, but as I said, I'm not married to any idea. The only, what I did last time when we sort of like unofficially discussed this with Phil, Nate, and I think Justin was on the call at some point, and Jason, the decision that we made was that we will bring it up during this meeting. And the reason why we're doing that is that more people need to participate and decide on a name. This is what we're doing now. And we understand that Phil and myself, maybe we had more time to think about this thing. So maybe we don't have to decide now, but next meeting, when or if the discussion happens to be moved on in Zulip, we should decide on a name and just get the GitHub repo going soon.
You can always change the name later.
My question was, how bad is it if we have to change the name, other than people just having to reorientate them?
Yeah, I think the learning curve is the only real cost there to changing the name. It's pretty easy to change a GitHub repository name and keep all of its issues. And if we have to change the forum topic to match, that's also, editing a node or term or something. Yeah.
Yeah. And for the record, since this is being recorded and it brings up naming and separation of things, this discussion started with the suggestion that it should be a different organization, actually. But there was resistance there. I see you, Jen, nodding as a yes. Yes, it could be. So why we decided we'll start off with a repo is that you can easily transfer issues between repositories within the same organization, but you cannot do that across organizations with GitHub currently. But once we've got the issues transferred to a separate repo, we can transfer repositories, the ownership of repositories, to a separate organization, which could be community or whatever.
Interesting.
So let's go with a low-hanging fruit, which is a separate repo. We sort of like separate the issues out. Maybe we also create a matching category for the forum, and then just get things started. Baby steps. Phil?
Yeah, no, I think that's good. I think kind of what my thought on this is to have a place where the discussion can take place, where anybody can join in on the discussion, but then have a place like on GitHub where the official issues and tasks related around that discussion take place. I don't feel like everybody needs to be involved in having access for those issues and tasks and things of that nature. But so that's why I'm kind of saying, you know, I'm not opposed to having a separate platform for the discussions themselves. But I do think that GitHub is a really good place to keep track of, you know, code of conduct. It's like, okay, here is the code of conduct. Well, now we've talked about it in discussion and we've decided to change the code of conduct. And now we can see within the repo who made the changes and why they made the changes and when and all of that stuff. That way, documents, policies, things of that nature, there's kind of a track record and a history of how we got from point A to point F, you know, and as opposed to, well, we discussed it and it's on Google Sheet somewhere and we'll have to go dig for it. It's open to everybody to be able to see how those types of very important discussions were able to evolve and have gotten to the point of where they are. So I'm kind of looking at the big picture on this, that if we want to bring in business, if we want to bring in organizations, and we want to present ourselves as being a professional community, those types of entities are going to kind of pick through some of this stuff and go, yeah, no, these guys have their ducks in a row, you know, and I can see exactly why they came up with the decisions that they made and how they got there, and I agree with it. And yeah, no, these guys are solid. Let's rock and roll with it. So
I think that Phil mentioned that in the previous discussions that we had, and it sort of like resembled something that we have privately now, the PMC discussion thing, which is not open to everybody. So this will be a respective thing for the community until maybe some of the issues there might need to be brought up with the PMC.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're just about out of time. I'll just quickly say overall, I'm fine with what's being said. I think, like Jen, the word talk in a GitHub repository seems like dissonance to me. It just doesn't I don't think about GitHub as a chat, you know, talk seems like a chat platform and GitHub doesn't feel right for that, but I don't feel strongly about this. And so if for example, you know, I'm happy to defer to Phil and Greg if you guys want to try that and see what people's reactions are. I wouldn't object, but I personally, I would just call it community. Is what I would do. But
yeah, and we can have the forum respective thing be called talk if you want. But
do we need further discussion on this, or is this something that we can just act on? Does anybody? I'm not sure. I feel like we're going to get any further. Go ahead.
But I would say at this point, I mean, I like the branding idea of talk, keeping it all seamless. If we do a forum or, you know, some other area for that, and then it all funnels down. But I mean, I'm not going to sit here and fight the name. What we do need for sure is the repo created. Do we need to go ahead and create an issue for getting that repo created and getting a list of labels that can be created for that? Or I think, Greg, you probably have the access to be able to create that kind of stuff.
I don't think I do, but Jen has. Do I?
I think you do. I think I tried to make you have everything I had. I can find out real quick.
I guess my question is, do we want to go ahead and create an official issue to get this created, or just get it done?
I think we'll just do it, probably.
Yeah, get it done.
Okay.
Sarvasri, you're raising your hand.
Yeah, Sarvasri, go ahead. Can't hear you. You're muted.
I was thinking community discussion forum already exists or not on the forums?
Yes, but the forum has categories for reporting issues or asking questions about how to do things with the product. We're talking about processes now and discussions and decisions about the community.
But
So
I,
this is-
I think Sarvashri's asking, do we have a community forum already on the forum? And the answer is no. We
No.
don't have anything designated as community on the forum, but we could.
Community discussion or something.
I'm not opposed to that. Me personally, I would like to see a separate forum that is nothing but discussion about the community, just to separate out from people that are asking questions and things of that nature. But that's just kind of how my brain works.
Sure.
I'm not going to sit here and fight it. And again, it's, these are things that we can create temporary locations for this stuff. And if we need to move them, break them out into more structured places later, then we can always do that. I just, sometimes I kind of look at that. It's like, if there is a possibility of breaking it out later, well, let's just go ahead and do the work to do that now. That way it's less work later. So that's just kind of how I think about that. But
Well, I think we're not going to be able to make a decision on any further steps today. We just don't have time.
Right.
But we could, I think we have enough consensus to move forward on the GitHub repo today.
Great.
And then we can start talking about next steps. And I'm not saying it has to take, they could happen quickly. Like, yeah, I don't even want to, let's save that.
You're right.
The next meeting.
We don't need a plan for that right now. It's just just some ideas being thrown out, and I think over a 2, 3, 4 year plan, it's kind of like, well, let's be moving towards this direction. So
Thank you.
I'm perfectly happy with getting repo going. That way we at least have that dedicated location for discussions exactly like this. This is about the community. It has nothing to do with the code. Just having that repo out there is going to be really good. So
It's really about the future of Backdrop, where you're going, right?
yep, yes,
So it could be community future or Backdrop futures discussion.
Well,
Like-
it's about that too, but it's also about things today. So
yeah.
code of conduct, philosophy, things of that nature, branding, copyright information.
okay.
Yeah, Jen, is right. We need a good word.
Well, I
Too
say
late.
we open up the repo. We
So-
open up the repo on any name, and then the first discussion can be to change it if somebody wants.
Yes,
It
exactly.
exists. I post a link. I made the PMC admins, so anyone should be able to change the name later as needed.
Okay, cool. It starts off
Can-
as
can we at
Backdrop
least-
community.
Can we? Are you going to do community? I was going to say, can we at least start with talk and then see how that goes, and if if people don't like it, then we can change it later.
You can change it.
I don't
Craig,
know.
you can change it if you want.
That's kind of my thought. But
I started with community, but you can
Alright.
change it.
I like community. Anyway. So we have something to start on, some way to
Yes.
get.
Let's make the first topic to have everybody weigh in on
Yeah, and-
what they
and
think the name
Phil-
should be.
And Phil, if you don't have access to transfer topics, issues from the current .org, the b.org repo, just post, maybe start a dedicated topic on Zulip and say, I think that this should be moved to the community repo. And then one of us will action it if they agree. Actually, maybe we'll let people give a few thumbs up. And if everyone agrees, we move it.
okay,
That
that's
seems
fine.
reasonable,
I'll
yeah.
see if I can get an issue going for labels that need to be created. I've got a loose list, and it can be amended, changed, whatever, but at least it's a starting point for creating labels for the different points of topics.
Sounds good.
Hey,
Action, I like it.
I think that's probably as far as we can go, and we should probably end this meeting. Noticing that nobody has joined us for the development meeting. Does anybody know if Nate has been able to change his weekly meeting yet? Or
So Nate's weekly meetings changed a lot. He has like 3 meetings in it. There was one point where they were all scheduled at the same time, and he was like, screw it, I'm not doing any of them. I'm going to do Backdrop. And then they separated. So one of them started half an hour ago, and one of them starts in half an hour. And he's like, well, now I'd have to miss like 2 work meetings to do the Backdrop meeting. So he decided to do the 2 work meetings instead. So he will not be joining us today.
well, let's tell you what. Let's end this meeting, and then we can talk about that.
Yep, cool.